All right. Well, greetings. Good to be back here in Leipsic. It's always exciting to be able to share this stuff with you guys, and we'll do our best to get this recorded with somebody cutting the grass outside. No, it'll be okay. It'll be all right. As you know, we were here last week. We spent a couple days in the community, had an opportunity to have several meetings on both Tuesday and then again on Thursday, giving folks an opportunity to come out and talk a little bit about the community. And what the purpose of today is for me to share back with you what we heard, and then go ahead and give you some ideas on what we think makes sense to be able to tell the story and help to connect the dots, especially with a focus not only on marketing the community, but really positioning the community to kind of shore up the values so that as you move forward, you can move forward with the confidence of preserving those things that you all cherish. So that's kind of what we're focused in on. I apologize for the screen being a little dim. When we get to the point where colors make a difference, I'll flip the screen around so you can see it. But I always like to give a quick recap. I think that, well, who is it? He's doing a good job cutting it.
He is. He always does a good job.
So one of the big things you all, I'm pretty confident you all have achieved the honor of having the highest percentage participation in a branding process. But when you have 180 some odd members of the community, then it doesn't take that many to get that process leader there. But you had good turnout, and we were able to have really good conversation with folks, and that was something that was good to hear, because many times when it comes to a branding process, the smaller the community, the fewer resources they might already have. But the smaller the community, the harder it is to go ahead and just say, yeah, we're going to go with this. You get used to letting everybody have an opinion. And sometimes you just have to be comfortable with pulling the trigger and going with an idea. I really don't think anything that I'm going to show or suggest today is going to be the least bit controversial, though. The values and attributes of your community, they seem pretty clear to me. So I want to share a little bit of that with you today. So one of the first things that I want to introduce to you is this idea of having a community or destination brand. And for your community, because the community is so small, that governmental identity of the community and the destination brand are essentially going to be the same thing. But I want you to be very mindful of the fact that a city government is an institution. It's an organization that collects taxes and makes decisions, and sometimes it irritates people. So you want to have a little bit of a gap, but you just always want to remember that as we introduce this, we want these resources to be something that the community can use. So if the auxiliary is working on an event, then they feel comfortable using this just like anybody else. So making that open access to the resources is something that we really focus in on. Now, when we create a brand system, that brand system starts with 4 primary components that you need to define to be able to create connectivity moving forward. One is defining a color palette. Decide on some colors and use those colors consistently as you go through and you communicate. The second is deciding on typefaces or fonts and limiting that down to a reasonable number for you to be able to visually connect the dots with that consistent use of typeface. The third is a consistent message. And then the fourth is a consistent approach to graphics. So I'm going to build up that toolbox that I'm recommending for you guys today. The place I always like to start is I like to start with the color palette. So what I did with you all was I took 2 things. I took some of the things that you got out of the water, crabs and things like that kind of derived a basis of your industry. And then I also took some of the photos that I took in your community. So your industry and your place. And I have this really cool program that allows me to essentially analyze the colors that exist and then pull colors out that are derived from both. So what I did, and I'm going to turn the screen around because it does help to see this in person, but I selected what ended up being 7 different colors, 3 different shades of blue, then kind of a nice orange red, a charcoal gray, and then 2 kind of golden yellows. And you can actually see a lot of these colors might be derived from crab, or they might be derived from landscape or some of the buildings, things like that. But it just gives us a really nice historic color palette. It's not too bright, it's not too garish, and it's something that can be unique to you. But in the basis of it, you're still really landing in those reds, yellows, blues, and blacks that you see so much in nautical colors. So we didn't want to go too far overboard. We didn't want it to feel too coastal or too beachy at all, but we wanted it to be appropriate to a connection with water. Does that make sense to everybody? So then from there, what we do is we select typefaces. So what I did was I selected 3 different typefaces for you guys. Now, in the primary typeface, really the primary typeface is only used for your name. So Leipsic is represented in that primary typeface. I looked at your pre-existing welcome signs. They're really attractive signs. I wanted to do something that did not make you feel like you had to replace those to use any of these tools. So I actually selected something that existed in a very traditional typeface, but I made a conscious decision to pick something that's pulled from a stencil base. So it's actually, this particular typeface has an industrial background that's derived from packaging and painting, spray painting onto crates of seafood. So it's kind of a cool background story to why that typeface was selected. It kind of ties in, and it allows us to be both historic while also tapping in to that still to this day working nature of your community. The secondary typeface is a very, very traditional typeface. It's called Garamond. I'm sure some of you probably have seen it before. I'm showing it in Garamond italic, which I'm using as a very attractive and traditional and historic accent. And then the third, the support typeface, is the one that is called a sans serif typeface. It's the one that's content neutral and a little bit more contemporary. And it will allow us to be a little bit more edgy if we need to be. So we have 3 typefaces that really allow us the opportunity to get at 3 different personalities. Now, a lot of times, communities make a mistake when they're making typeface selections because they say, our community's pretty, so we pick a pretty typeface. And then it ends up not being very legible, and it's definitely not expandable. So you'll see how this selection of 3 typefaces goes into what we call brand extension. But moving forward, after we have the colors and we have the typeface, then I like to introduce what we call the word type. So the word type is that consistent representation of your name. And because of that stencil nature of the typeface, you can literally just use the words and people will start to recognize connection. So you don't always have to have a full graphic and ornate stuff. You can have something that literally is just your name and still has connectivity back into the system. So then from there, I always like to dig into the message a little bit. And there were things that we heard over and over again about the values of the community. Obviously the water, the watermen, the history, that connection between the watermen, that entire industry. And just really, it's not just, I think as we talked to folks who had made their living from the water, it's not at all a simple industry reference. It is a connection between people and place. So that really was kind of tied all through it. And then just that whole idea of small town. I mean, you're a community of 180, is it 2 or 6 or 1 or somewhere in there. And even in a community that size, a community with like 91 mailboxes, we still heard that, oh, well, I don't really know those folks. They live on the west side of town. You know, it's like that's the suburb of Leipsic. You know, right? Exactly. So it's funny that small town and that connection and that everybody knowing everyone is something that folks really, really seemed to be. They wanted to preserve that. You know, they like living here because they like living in a place where they know their neighbors and where people support one another. So after we identify those brand values, I always like to write something. I call it a brand statement. Sometimes it's really long, sometimes it's really short. I felt like for you guys, I wanted something that was just really nice and impactful, that kind of hit on the things that I heard. So I'm going to read this for you now. From the banks of the river that shares our name, we were born. We are the keepers of this special place. We are the stewards of our water. We are the tellers of our tales. We are the watermen and the farmers, the fourth generation and the new additions. We are all the best of small town life here on the water. We are Leipsic, Delaware's working waterfront, and we are built on water. So just a very, very simple, very clean, but then when you bring all that in together, it sets up this identity and this thing that just kind of makes sense. You know, why work too hard when the imagery makes sense? Now, I did something a little interesting here because I'm introducing two messages simultaneously. The idea of Delaware's working waterfront. That is what you are. Undeniable. That message is what I actually refer to as a moniker. It's an undeniable truth, you know? It is a title that can't be argued, and it is a title that we hope to stand the test of time. So the moniker is an important tool for you all to acknowledge and adopt. But then we also had a slightly more marketing angled message that is simply built on water. That allows us to tell our origin story. It allows us to tell the relationship between the people and the water and just all those things. It really ties it together in a little bit more eloquent way, but it also positions ourselves to have a statement that has a little bit more flexibility. In 5 years, if some things have started to change and we need to adopt a slightly different message, we can adapt that built on water message without ever feeling like we need to change Delaware's working waterfront. Does that make sense? So it gives you the versatility in the system while also still maintaining that consistency of we are who we are, and we're proud of that. Now, I will say I did my best on this illustration to be able to draw a boat that was reminiscent of the boats that I saw. One of the things that I have learned in this business is there is always a technically minded person who points out how I got it wrong. You know, there's going to be something about this that's not right, or something about that that's not right, or make sure you know the difference between a crab boat and an oyster boat and all that kind of stuff. I tried to do something that was generic enough but leaned a little bit more on the crab boat because that's what I felt like I saw more of and that kind of thing. But just know if there are any technical tweaks that we need to have, I'm more than happy to do that. I got schooled on the difference between a button accordion and a keyed accordion when I was working in Louisiana, and I now know that the magic is in the details. So, you start off with this overall kind of primary identity. From there, I like to dig in a little bit more. I created just kind of a simplified one that brought in that crab silhouette. And then also playing around with the color variations so that it can go on a dark color background as well. Then also creating ones just to test the system, make sure that it works in one color, because we can't always print everything. Make sure that it works in black and white, because sometimes we got a photocopy. And all that stuff really started to check out. So I was excited about that. But then from there, all of that still is just that primary community identity. Where a system starts to grow wings is what we call brand extension. So, we had showed this before, but just having this kind of simple stylized variations of being able to talk about historic Leipsic, being able to have graphics that are a little bit more marketing savvy. Now, when I was here last week, there was discussion about the name of the museum. I'm not really weighing in on it. I'm simply acknowledging that I think watermen and farmers, and that's what we have always been calling. So I wanted to show how that amenity, it's essential that it rolls into that brand system. It can have its own graphic. Look at how clever that is. A shipboat and a pitchfork, man. Any number of things that you want to do, but the colors, the typeface, they all create connectivity. You've been working so hard on bringing this museum to life that you want to make sure that the overall community gets credit for that asset. One of the big things that we were looking at, obviously, was the Oyster Festival. So again, tying in, using the typeface, using the colors. I did something a little interesting here on the logo where I'm tying it both to the historic downtown, but I'm also tying it to the Delaware Bayshore so that you can create regional relevance to that event. So now all of a sudden, by creating that connection to the Bayshore in your event identity, you can say, hey, you're in Delaware City, you're in Newcastle, you're in Lewis, this is part of your region. So it's kind of a nice way to create that connectivity. And then I also went through and I even designed kind of a poster that sets the tone for what that might look like. Really textural, really just, it's kind of nice how everything ties in together. Now, we talked a lot about signage, and you're an unbelievably large community with complex street structures. No, just kidding. Just because you're small doesn't mean that you're not a community that couldn't be aided by signs. So what I did was I designed a comprehensive signage system, and I want to talk to you a little bit about what each one of these are and what they do. So on this side, this one, welcome to historic Leipsic. This is what's called a pole-mounted gateway. So you have arrival signs and gateway signs at the kind of main entry points, but then a sign like this would actually occur right here in front of this building. It's when the place starts to change and you can kind of re-announce arrival. I think a lot of times communities we think about, we put a gateway up in our corporate limits, welcome to our community, and then there's no more communication there. You can't announce arrival over and over again. So a pole-mounted gateway is a very important way to do that. Now this sign and this sign, these are both called trailblazer signs, a couple different designs. These trailblazers are all going to be controlled by Delaware, especially if they're in the Delaware right of way. So these are designs that are prescribed by what's called the MUTCD, which is a federal standard for signage that the state had to adopt. But these designs, they're simple enough that the graphics should be approved through Delaware in the wayfinding division. Here, I'm showing a smaller size sign that's a little bit more oriented to a pedestrian. Parking. If you are going to have any visitors come to the community, I'll tell them where to park. And then this is an informational kiosk that can simply distribute brochures, show a map of the community, and just kind of tell that story. Does that make sense? You all, I want to reiterate this because I think my first time to the community, I was struck by the gateway signs. They're very attractive. I think they look good. There is no reason for you to feel like you need to replace those. that would be, in my mind, with all the things that you could do, that would be a redundant use of resources. So I would much rather see some additional kind of pole mounted gateways as you get in, or this next slide is actually one of my favorites. And this is showing a series of street banners. Now, for the cost, there is very few things in the public space that makes more of an impact than banners. And a lot of times people think that banners are just pretty, and like that's where it stops. But banners can actually be very strategic in our use in the urban landscape. One of the first things that we know to be the case is when banners exist, traffic slows. There's a subconscious kind of trigger that in places where street banners exist, typically vehicles and pedestrians coexist. So studies have shown that traffic actually moves at a slower rate in districts where street banners have been. Absolutely. Right.
Delaware's front porch. But the hometown heroes have a photo in the military uniform.
Cool.
And it gives them
Very cool.
And bridges service.
It's awesome. Yeah.
I slow down. I read every single one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then in addition to that, there sometimes you can use banners to promote events. We've had some communities where they've actually used banners as an art gallery. So they'll go through and they'll get community artists to design these banners, and they'll auction off the original art, use the money from the auction to pay to have the banners produced, and then run them down. So you've got, art along the street. So there are a lot of different things that you can do here. And really kind of telling people visually where our community exists. I think one of the things that we've talked a lot about here is you have this very interesting dynamic because you have an industry and you have access to the water that's very intriguing to people. But to a certain degree, we know that as a community, we would like to make more money off of visitors, but we also want to minimize the impact of those visitors. So when those two dynamics come together, it just means we really want to control the way that they act. and we want to really curate the way that they experience the community, where they go, where they don't go, and that kind of thing, so that the impact of those visitors can be a positive one and not detract from the quality of life. So a lot of times people will use banners to help denote that, hey, we have a primary L of streets in this community, and that's where we want you to explore. So we're going to concentrate our banners on our two primary streets, and then, keep it like that. So, and those are literally just examples. Now, one of the things that I will say is typically most of the designs that I will show are always, I like solid color backgrounds. A lot of times when people design banners, they start with a white computer screen instead of thinking about the context of where that banner is going to go, and then they end up over designing it. And then it ends up being really busy, and then when you put it in the environment, it adds clutter instead of adding clarity. So that's why I always try to show, what I consider to be things that will help to create a rhythm or a pattern. You should, who's your power provider here? You should be able to add, they'll be able to tell you what a maximum size would be, and then what you'll do is the brackets have a wire strap, a metal strap, screw down strap. But
you've seen another
absolutely. And even just the wood poles like that, you definitely do not have to have historic poles to put them on. And in fact, sometimes with poles like this, it provides the most impact because it adds, it adds what we call a false ceiling. It brings people's eyes down, and then they're able to focus on a really attractive ceiling, and it makes your whole community look better because they're seeing that. Now, then from there, I always like to show some examples of collateral. And collateral really, it's just any place you can think of putting the identity. So, if you guys saw me, I'm trying to be nice and professional, so I don't have my baseball hat on, but it's in the car, and I'll put it on as soon as it goes. So I always design a baseball hat for communities. So, you can just see, just simply taking that boat graphic and just making that yours, and you can have Leipsic across the back. I tried to show you some things that I felt like would really fit with the nature of the community. So here I'm putting your logo on a Columbia PFG shirt, because it's like that's the kind of brand that we want you to be associated with. So those are some simple things that you can take a look at. Now, something else that I did, and I do not do often for communities, but I felt like it would be cool for you all. In 2020, you're going to be celebrating your 300th anniversary, right? That's what we decided. We decided that we didn't know exactly where 1720 came from, but we know that that's the day.
On the sign.
So yeah, it's on the sign. So what I wanted to do was I actually, sometimes I'll design like, bicentennial, tricentennial logos for folks. For you all, I wanted to design a city flag. Something that could be your flag. And a lot of times people design flags very poorly. There's a rule of thumb about flags. A 5-year-old should be able to look at a flag for 30 seconds and then be able to withdraw it. And that's one of the things that I always try to remember if I ever go through and do a flag design. So what I did for you guys, it's kind of a variation of the state flag. It's obviously, it's derived from those colors, but just something that can be yours. And it ties into that connection with the water. Yeah. And then, again, I like to show different merchandise, shirts, did a couple different designs. I mean, just do really fun things and have this as a way for people to take pride in showing where they visited or where they live. So many times, I mean, if we were to go and think about how does someone who lives here in Leipsic now show their pride in where they live? How do they tell other people where they live? Is there anything that they can kind of show off?
T-shirts and firehouse.
There you go. And I will say the overwhelming rule of thumb for most communities is most people who have a shirt that is connected with their community, it's either a high school oriented shirt or it's what we call a car wash shirt. It's the kind of shirt that's not really attractive enough to wear anywhere other than cutting the grass or washing your car. So, you want to have some stuff that people are excited to wear. And then finally, I always like to just show the community itself in a format that it could be advertised. And this doesn't mean that you all need to go out and spend a bunch of money to buy ads. That's not what this exercise is for. And it's not really even what we're suggesting. What we're suggesting is that your residents deserve to see their home through a really polished eye. Because they're the ones who are making this place what it is. And they're the ones that we need their help to continue to move it forward.
Well, make it too nice, everybody will need it.
There you go. So this is, I put together kind of an ad composition here, showing, and you can see it a little better there. It's got a lot of texture to it. But, it gives you this opportunity to kind of set the tone for the community, for the pace, for the kind of things that you might see. Highlighting and I was trying through a lot of these messages to make that connection between both the watermen as well as agriculture, and tying in, because I think that's really, it's a single story, the relationship between people and place, and the way that we you know, get those things and have a bountiful life from it. But you know, I think that the thing that you all, I think you know it inherently, but the crabbing, the oystering, I mean, that stuff is fascinating to people that don't know it. And what I tried to do with these recommendations was I tried to walk down that road where I was really elevating the stature of that kind of work. One of the comments that I really took away from the process the most was Craig, when he was talking about how I love when people are interested in what we do, but I don't want to feel like a monkey in a zoo. And that really, I absolutely understand what he means by that. Like, don't treat me like I'm a living fossil. Don't, you know, I mean, it's like, this is how we live. And believe it or not, if you open your mind and open your ears, you can probably learn a lot from us. And that was really the spirit that I was trying to infuse in this, was a very proud and confident message around who we are and what we do. So that's what I was able to put together in terms of walking down that road. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think that it's walking down the right path? Do you think the strategy and the recommendations make sense? And what other things would you like to see me add into the system as we move it towards completion? Okay. Good.
I love it. I want to change things.
Cool.
I thank you. And, I thought it just tells a story very, very well. Very well.
It was excellent.
Awesome. Great
It's
stuff.
warm, it's comforting, it's proud.
I do too.
Sure.
I do too, yeah.
I was gonna say, we should
Yeah.
start making those all the time.
No, I love it.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Everyone else.
Right.
Yeah, we love
Yeah.
it. We
Right.
love it.
The,
Oysters are pretty creatures.
right. Right. Yeah.
Just the shit.
Well, and again, it's one of those things, and I will say, I did my best to. You saw on that banner, there was one banner where I brought in a crab, an oyster, and a bass all in the same place. Trying to, now the bass, I still was a little confused. I tried to dig into Craig to make sure that I knew what I was talking about, whether, you know, how many variations are there in the type of bass that you're catching here, and you know, some people call them rockfish, and what does rockfish mean here versus rockfish in North Carolina? You know, there's all that stuff where kind of the being specific about it. And oysters are prettier in photography than they are in graphics. Yeah, line drawings, they look rough. So I was trying to figure out best ways, but absolutely, I'll make sure as we go through that we get a good balance of it, because it's not one. And I wanted to make sure that it wasn't one-dimensional only crab, but a crab is so, it's funny because a crab silhouette draws in an automatic appeal to certain people, and it gives them a comfort level to explore. To a certain degree in this region, a crab silhouette is almost like what a pineapple is to us in South Carolina. So it was one of those things where I had a little bit more comfort, but I absolutely understand and agree with you. We want to make sure we've got a good diversity of that image.
Crab, no one has to think about what is it, where I have heard people say, is that an oyster or a clam?
Right.
You know, I mean, we all know the difference, but, you know, there are not always who do, I guess.
Mhm.
crab is a crab, is a crab, you can't deny it.
Plus a few years ago, our doctor was literally a food space.
Mm-hmm.
Police literally was in it. And my grandfather and my father.
Right.
And then Maggie is Myers down Beach right now.
Yeah.
She came to us at Harry
Gotcha.
County.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But crabs are always overrun the oyster
Mm-hmm. Does it make sense if obviously I had to make a choice on the boat to decide whether to lean towards a crab boat over an oyster boat? Was that,
I was gonna say, look at that, grandfather used to
is it ambiguous enough to be interpreted as boat? I mean,
Yeah,
most,
somebody.
okay, good, because I'm,
Sand on a piece of equipment on the side.
yeah.
You got an oyster.
Because that was a boat before the oysters. They were all built in New Jersey. My grandfather had Yellow Mary and Front Louise. They had this.
Cool.
This one.
But the crab boat is quite a bit different from that, without it.
They just
Okay.
have a small cabin on a crab boat. But she-
Crab boat.
Right.
That's
Yeah. We need to wrap up so we can be leaving right when Craig walks in.
Gotta go. Because they're feeling like they're coming any more meetings.
Any questions for me? Anything that,
No, and to Charles's point, I think that what you've shown us with the Oyster Festival or with some of the other things, anything that we, maybe maybe there's, a time of the year that we want to do something with the local waterfowl.
absolutely. And that's
or
where,
something
I didn't want to incorporate too many images in the primary identity, but I love the idea of having some sort of event that allows us to tie into waterfowl. So if you guys are good with that, as I'm preparing the package, I'll put some thought into some potential names and ideas and see if I can create something and throw it that way.
It's a quieter industry, and
Right.
when I say quiet, less recognized by
Mhm.
those of us who
Right,
don't
but
participate in the sport,
you know,
but,
as we heard,
it's important to the community.
right, as we heard last week, the waterfowl and the sporting industry is one of the ways that the state knows of Leipsic. And I was actually surprised as I was asking around, people seem to know of this community. If it's not Sambo's, it seems to be hunting. So it's kind of interesting, that exposure and that access.
Craig's the one.
Yeah, right. Any other questions for me? All right.
I think it's amazing.
Well, I'm excited, and I'll tell you, I was in another community this week. I was working over in West Virginia, and all week long while I was working on the stuff for them, I was excited to come here because I just, there's a strategy that I develop for every community, and I go through that quest to try to figure out what's right for them. But I was just really excited about how this stuff was working and how it looked and how, this was a community that when I toured the Delaware Bayshore, this was the one that I left the entire Bayshore with a sense of intrigue and wanting to come back and learn more. And, so it was exciting to me, especially when Ed reached out and said that there's an opportunity to do this, because there was already an intrigue with it. And so I was excited to be able to come back and I'm glad that you guys don't feel like it was too off base and Absolutely.
I don't think it gets rid of the fonts and all that,
Right.
so you can see the graphics.
We'll go under, that's what it's one.
Okay. Yeah, so Mayor, I'll read this for you.
I see that.
You want me to read this for you? Can you see it? Because I know it's light.
I know you did.
You should read it. It's good. Yeah, because it's
All right.
nice to hear it again.
All right. From the banks of the river that shares our name, we were born. We are the keepers of this special place. We are the stewards of our water. We are the tellers of our tales. We are the watermen and the farmers, the fourth generation and the new additions. We are all the best of small town life here on the water. We are Leipsic, Delaware's working waterfront, and we are built on water.
That sounds good from my perspective. I like it.
Well, I mean,
I do, but I understand there's a lot more perspective than this.
Well, and I think the thing though is, you know, you guys, because you are such a small community, you do a really good job at giving everybody's opinion, you know, consideration. But from an industrial standpoint, you are a place that is truly tied to the land and water that you are connected to. And, you know, the farmers and the watermen are creating this engine that is allowing this place to be. And you're still doing that today. And I think that's what's really, when you talk about uniqueness, that's the thing that Leipzig's got. That's the thing that you all should sell. And it is the combination of that and the preservation of that small town feel that gives you. So if you can assure and know that kind of waterman story and the small town feel are the things that are attractive, then you can always hold a litmus test up against those things and make sure that your actions are helping to preserve those instead of dilute those. And that's kind of a big thing. So then from there, Mayor, the overall identity, and I was telling them I did my best to be as sensitive to boat design as possible because I know how technical folks are, but I wanted it to be, you know, it seemed relevant to that kind of ambiguous space between a crab boat and an oyster boat. Because, you know, I know that there's some differences there, but introducing that idea of Delaware's working waterfront and that idea of built on water. And then we went
One of the things that perspective is this is a useful capture here. This week I was called more similar to you.
Well, and I will say, as I was thinking strategies for this community, I continued to think back about some of the challenges this runs right upon us. And I made a very deliberate decision to incorporate Delaware's working waterfront into this community economic development initiative. So that people understood that this was a holistic way of life for this community, not a couple of people who run a business who care nothing about the environment in which they're connected to. You know, there's really it's kind of like a stake in the sand saying, hey, this is truly who we are. And hopefully that will help to create some additional facets to the story of the watermelon industry so that maybe as dialogue continues, some of the conversations about regulation and the way that you can make your living can be a little clearer about, hey, you know, we're part of a community and we're part of an ecosystem and we're, believe it or not, smart enough to do things that aren't going to wreck our own future.
Tools that we can use.
Right.
And it's all taken out of as individual perspective, it kind of captures the argument that was, a lot of people like to do. I appreciate that.
Well, and I
understand the abilities of it.
I tried to make it capture the argument without being argumentative.
That's right.
You know, it's kind of like,
That's the best way to do it.
right, exactly.
It's more entertaining than it is argumentative.
Exactly.
But if it's captivating, then it's going to perfect.
Right.
It sparks the conversation.
Yep. Yep.
The interest, and I think that's the rule for I like the system. I like the system.
You've always had it, and vision.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
we've used that to the other waterfront, templates that we're going to put out. And even to, I think we have looked at on that, and we've used it several times.
Yeah.
On
Yeah.
county level, on the state level, and here's who we are.
Exactly.
Check this out, could be call.
Right.
This is something that,
Yeah, so like when you go through and you launch the museum, making sure that that museum identity gets rolled in and connected to the community as a whole, so tying in both that life on the water and life on the land, the Oyster Festival, and being able to create something that's really nice and kind of marketing savvy. And one of the things I pointed out to them was when you do that, connecting that event back into the entire Delaware Bay Shore. So it really becomes truly a regional event and an opportunity to expose people to the community. Designed a little sample poster there. Showed what signage might look like. Don't need a ton of signage in the community, obviously, but having just kind of consistent signage. So not replacing gateways, but once we enter into the main corridor, simply being able to point people to the fire hall, point people to park amenities and things like that.
I think that gives you shape and create your strategy for the primary phase, because I thought that was pretty.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So as I was going through, I mean, one of the most impactful things in my first visit to the community was I really loved the gateway signs. I thought they were really attractive. And I wanted to find something that kind of fit into that traditional serif typeface that you guys had selected. But I also wanted it to truly be yours, so that if you only put the word with no graphics at all, people would still know that it was yours. And what I actually found was I found a typeface that was derived from an old product stencil for the seafood industry. So those stencils would have been used to spray paint the different kinds of things on the outside of crate packaging. So that's why I picked what I did there, being able to kind of tie that into the bigger story. So it still has that traditional serif look, but then it's got that stencil kind of working industrial connection without having to get gritty, if that makes sense. Yeah, so we showed, we were looking at the signs, we did banner designs.
I think I would feel that
We like those a lot.
There, yeah. There, what's the feeling there that the
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, everyone says Americana. Oh, no, that's different. Right.
And I like the banners, and we were talking about, the opportunity to attach them to poles. Apparently some,
Yeah.
so, that would be
Yeah.
nice.
And honestly, if that, the museum logo really, from my standpoint, I had played around with a couple different things. That was the one that I landed on. The big thing that I really liked was I liked the idea of some sort of simple, clever convergence of imagery that you think about from a farm standpoint and from a water standpoint. Don't take any of these things as, oh, this is set in stone, you either do it or you don't do it and throw it away. With things like that, maybe that concept spurs a better concept. And as it goes, as we're moving through that process, I know you guys have some paperwork to sign on as it relates to museum and ramps and parking and stuff like that. If you want something, if you want me to tweak something, you want me to take another stab at something, just you have to shoot me an email, we'll get it right. You know what I mean? It's you can never really forecast exactly where it's going to land, but just wanted it to be kind of savvy. Then we designed merchandise, clothing, hats, shirts. I even designed a city flag that you guys could do for the tricentennial. Start to roll that out for your 2020. Some T-shirts, and then some advertising. And again, like I was telling them, that I designed some mock ads, but this is not intended for you all to go out and buy a full-page ad in Delaware Magazine. This is more for you to be able to use and share to your community members, maybe put on social media somewhere. Maybe you blow these up and you put some of them around, town hall so folks can see them as they come in and be reminded of how special their home is. I did. I did. A lot of these, I have a mixture of some of the ones from last week and then some of the ones on my trip last year. Yeah, that was when we were doing the exploration visit with the Bayshore. So I was able to pull all my shots from the community when I did that, and then tie them with some of the ones I took. Got some really cool kind of textural ones from this year too, especially craft pots and stuff like that. So. All right, y'all.
Did you take that craft pot for the next one?
Yeah, that was last year too.
Really?
Yeah. I took a cool one this year of the giant stack of bushel tops over at Pleasanton's. This is like a white clapboard wall with this stack of bright brown bushel tops. That's the thing. It's just this. There's so, and in fact, I posted that picture on my personal Instagram when we were here last week, and people were like, "Oh my God, where is this?"
We had a craft pot.
Did you? That's cool. That's cool. All right, so let me tell you real quick about next steps. Obviously, I've recorded this presentation. I'm going to upload it to YouTube, and I'm going to email the link so that you all can share that. I'm also going to email over a PDF of the presentation so you can review it on your screen and be able to load the colors a lot better and that kind of stuff. Hopefully, if you all feel pretty good about the direction that the recommendations have gone, then as soon as you feel comfortable giving me the green light, I'm going to start prepping the style guide, and the style guide document will be what we'll talk about, all the typefaces, the colors, define all that stuff, and it will kind of set the how to use this correctly. It's just a very helpful guide. And then I will prep all the logos, and I will be able to share all that stuff with you digitally, and I'll also bring you up a flash drive that has all that stuff with it. And then, since I'm just down the road, as you all work towards rolling this out and implementing it, just feel free to reach out, and I will help to make that happen. Now, in addition to that, things like the Oyster Festival, would love to have the Oyster Festival committee take a look at the recommendations for that. And as soon as the committee approves that, I can get those resources directly to Leanne. And, depending on how all that stuff comes together. And then if you all think it appropriate, I would love to do, in a perfect world, what I would love to do is I would love to do a very, very brief presentation and actually kind of formally hand over the resource package to you at the July 3rd council meeting. So we can talk a little bit about strategy leading up to that point. But in my mind, there's no reason, especially if you don't think I'm like 6 miles off from the recommendations. If you feel like it's pretty solid, pretty close, then there's absolutely no reason that you can't have the final product in hand for that July 3rd.
I'm accepting it with the set up of it. Maybe, I don't see what's possible.
Yeah. I didn't.
I'm very skeptical.
Don
When
will
we
love
start
it.
this
Yeah.
process, but, yeah, I don't feel like I'm
Good. Good. All right, guys. Well, that sounds like a plan of action. Thank you all so much, and thanks for coming out on a Friday to come to a meeting.